You're live on Joy 99.7 FM. This is Ghana Connect. My name is Evans Mensah. In the last few weeks, Ghana has been begging.
We are looking for, as quickly as possible, a creditor committee to be established, so we will have the body with whom we can engage to bring those discussions as well as quickly as possible. You have good relations with China. We would like you to to encourage China to participate. Very important consideration for us is the Financial Stability Fund that has been promised as one of the key outcomes of these negotiations. And
at an international forum over the last week, our president, made the point on behalf of the rest of the African continent that, the rest of the world have left Africa to fend for itself.
We on the continent have been left alone to fend for ourselves. We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic, when even access to vaccines became a major problem for the African continent.
And soon we'll be sending a delegation to China to beg even more. We've begged Germany, we've begged Europe, and now we will be sending in March. Once the Chinese finish with their Congress, yes, they can't even meet us because they're holding a Congress. They can't because you're holding a Congress. We'll send a delegation there to beg even more. In a few days, Ghana will turn 66 years. We'll be 66 and still begging under a government that promised Ghana beyond aid. In fact, it's so bad that the German chief diplomat in Ghana, the ambassador, Daniel Crow, is now even urging members of parliament and Ghanaian businessmen with interest in China to join the begging train.
The President, the Minister of Finance have appealed to the German visitors to support Ghana in convincing China to come to the table. We are ready to do that. We already are in that. At the same time, I would like to encourage all Ghanaians who have strong ties with China, who are doing nice business with China, to also engage them and convince them that it's time to sit down with all the other creditors and agree on a package. Time is of the essence. Time is running out. Without this agreement with the bilateral creditors, the IMF package is in severe danger. So if there's any Ghanaian member of parliament listening who is very much engaged with business in China, please make best use in the interest of Ghana and the people in Ghana. I said Germany is prepared to...
So that's the German ambassador to Ghana, Daniel Crow. And all this is happening just days before our Independence Day. We will celebrate a day we became very proud country. We became masters of our own destiny. We'll be 66 years. And Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was so confident 66 years ago when he made this declaration.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
Tonight, a simple question, really. Are we? I'm joined by many connectors here in Ghana and across the globe. Enes Ayim is a tax expert and a graduate student with an interest in economics and policy, public policy. Professor Obodele Kombon is an associate professor and research coordinator of language, literature, and drama section of the African Studies Department, University of Ghana. Jod Poku is an accountant and radio show host, connects with us from Georgia in the USA. Dr. Lloyd Amwa is a director of the Center for Asian Studies at the University of Ghana. Julius Anthony is a youth activist and graduate student at the University of Ghana. But I want to start first with a member of parliament. This is on the back of the German ambassador, directly mentioning MPs by name, and says if there's any MP out there with an interest in China, you better join the train and get China and help getting China to the table. That is part of the begging train. I want to bring in the minorities ranking member on Foreign Affairs Committee. He's your spokesperson on that subject and joins us on the telephone line right now. Samuel Kudeta-Blakwa, thank you very much for your time here on Ghana Connect. Okay, we'll get him when he joins us. We'll get his thoughts on this. Let me go to my connectors who are joining us right now on the telephone line. And before we even go to the fundamental questions posed to us by Nkrumah, who's long dead, but his declaration is now asking us very serious questions as we approach independence. I bet all of you possibly would have heard the German ambassador to Ghana and what he's been saying today. If you haven't, he's actually now telling us about some things we should do ourselves to fix our own problem, including dealing with our own size of government. And he compares it to his own government.
Did I hear you right? You said size of the government? Well, I only can compare and with other countries like my own, and I can just come to the conclusion that there's a huge number of the number is much higher than in my country. So that might bring me to the conclusion maybe there's room for improvement. And we have a very Ghana has a very dense layers of institutions and responsibilities all over the country. The number is much higher than in my country. I cannot go out to the international community say I need help, but I'm not willing to cut my own budget expenditures.
I want to start with you, Prof. Come on, if you're on with me. This is a foreign diplomat in our country holding a press conference and telling us what you've just heard there. Give me your reaction.
Very well. So there are several books that will be useful, so I want to start off with those before we come directly into what was just said. Some of them include Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism, by Kwame Nkrumah, where he actually defines neo-colonialism as the state in which the state has all the outward trappings of independence. That is to say, it has a flag, it has a national anthem, it has all of these things. However, economically, all the strings are pulled from the outside. So that's one text. So you put a lot of what we're seeing right now in context. Another text that would be useful is Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And in that, essentially, the author goes through his own role in assuring that he could bring various quote-unquote third world countries into the political sphere of the so-called West by, essentially cooking up numbers, economic numbers, so forth and so on, in order to get them to take loans. And then once they take the loans are not actually transferred to the country, they're transferred to their cousins because the conditionality is that, for this loan, you have to use this contractor from, for example, the U.S., or you have to use, these materials that are coming from the U.S. So literally the aid is only going from one U.S. account to another U.S. account, and it never actually hits there. So they make money off of that. But then in addition to that, the country that supposedly got that aid has to pay it back, plus all types of exorbitant interest. And what they do is essentially those are the economic hitmen. And if you have a leader who decides that he's not going to go along with it, the main thing that they would do is make sure that president died in a plane crash. So we saw that, on the continent, Nana Samora Machel, we saw that, in terms of Ecuador, all of these leaders who wanted to stand up to the so-called West, that it was either we will enrich you personally or we will kill you in a plane crash. Another text that I'm actually reading right now is called White Malice, and it's the CIA and the covert recolonization of Africa, and essentially goes into these same things. So the reason why I bring this up is because, it's essentially, being between a rock and a hard place, where if you go for, these loans and things of that nature, then, they'll say, all right, we'll enrich you personally, but if you don't go for them, then they say that we'll kill you, directly. And we have so many cases of either being killed. For example, Nana Thomas Sankara, in his address to other African leaders, he says that, if we do not pay, he's talking about foreign debt, the capital lenders will not die, and I'm quoting him. If we pay, we will die. We cannot pay and we don't want to pay. We are not responsible for the debt burden. We have already paid a lot of the debt. We are asked to cooperate in researching balance mechanisms, balance in favor of those who own the financial institutions and use the power against the peoples. We cannot be accomplices. The Paris Club is there. Let's create the Addis Ababa Club for canceling our foreign debt. Our club should say our debt will not be paid. We should explain in other conferences that we cannot pay. We must be united. Otherwise, individually, we will be murdered. Avoiding debt repayment is a conditio sine qua non to allow us to free resources for our own development. So he said that in 1986 at the OAU, but then, of course, we know what happened to him in 1987. So this is what we're seeing, of those who either will not allow themselves to get into debt in the first place, or those who say that, all right, we're already in debt either from so-called independence or whatever. But again, we see this play time and time again. So essentially, before we start the conversation, I just want to situate it in the context of what happened to the good leaders who said we won't get in debt in the first place, or who said we won't pay the debt. And then it helps us to understand why our misleaders are doing the types of things that they're doing, because they've seen examples of those who have, tried to buck the system. And then
so that gives us a certain historical context for the conversation. Do I hear you say that our current predicament is fundamentally down to neocolonialism?
Very much so, very much so. So there are internal aspects to neocolonialism, and then there are also external aspects to neocolonialism.
And I'm going to come to you to expand. I'm going to come to you, Prof, to expand. But that's a very interesting beginning take on the subject. Ernest is joining us, connecting also with us. Ernest, do you agree with that?
Thanks, Evans. So I think that principally we are also architects of our own misfortune, because if you look at what we have done since independence, we have not managed to live within our means. We have always gone over budget, and consistently governments over the years have spent beyond their means, and this has piled up fiscal deficits, which has accumulated into public debts over time. So I think that principally we can always point an accusing finger at the Western powers, but we also should remember that some of our fingers will also be pointing down to us. So we should also look within and find out how we have contributed to the situation we find ourselves now as a country.
Okay, so that's a balancing view there from what Prof's position. Let me expand this even more and bring in George Poku, who is connecting with us from the U.S. He lives in one of those so-called imperialist countries, and so he's a man who migrated from here and went there and is making a living there. George, thanks for connecting with us. But you've heard the two positions as expressed there. We've been begging, as I've just been explaining there, for quite a while, and it's been intensified because of our current economic conditions. The two views is, one, neocolonialism is fundamentally to blame. The second view is, we should take part of the blame. Are you in the camp of neocolonialism? We should take part of the blame, or we should take all the blame? Where do you put this?
I am in the camp of we should take all the blame, because at the end of the day, the country has continuously shown that we are bereft of leadership. We are bereft of people that can take the bull by the horn. Malaysia, which also was colonized by the British and got independence roughly around the same time we got independence, was left with less resources than the Brits left for us, our own money that they left for us. But now we go back to Malaysia with a pan in our hand and our hands in our hands, begging them. Leaders since the days of, let me just put it this way, after Kwame Nkrumah up till now, have not had a clear view of where they want to put this country and how they are going to do it, point blank period. And so we haven't had any leaders that have the testicular fortitude to say that this is the way the country is going to go. I am not going to pander to anything, but I am going to set the country on a path for success. And that is why we are where we are. We should not blame neocolonialism. Again, half of the people that have ruled the country after Kwame Nkrumah have all, even including Kwame Nkrumah, have all been educated by the Westerns. So you definitely are going to have undertones of how they think and how things happen But the thing about it is we just lack the right leaders that will sacrifice. Greed is killing us, one. Two, lack of good leadership. And three, just plain old people not learning from history. If you allow history to repeat itself, it definitely is going to charge you a higher price. And that is what we are looking at right now.
John, let me pick your thought on something, because you live in a white man's country. Let me ask you that. I'm pretty sure you heard the German ambassador to Ghana and the things that he was saying directly at the press conference to us, the Ghanaian people. Because, of course, he's earned the right to say so, many have said, because we've gone to them to beg. You listen to him as a Ghanaian living in the U.S. How does that make you feel?
I am appalled. I am absolutely and totally appalled, because, again, it shouldn't take the German chancellor or councillor to come and tell us that we are running a government that is too big to manage. 85 ministers of states, that is what they are trimming it down to. What are they doing? And these have deputies and deputy deputies and deputy deputies, and all of these people are getting cars being bought for them, house help being hired to them, police being detailed to them. This is a country that is not living within its means. If I make $10 a month and I'm spending $25, where is the devil in this? Where is the sense in that? At the end of the day, you, Evans, you know what you make at the end of the month, and you try to live your life within what you have to do. We have heard about the year of return brought 3-point-something billion cedis. Where is the money? Where did the money go? And why are we back to where we are, going out to bed? We have gone through ERP, we have gone through SAP. Again, like I said, I think the last written developmental plan of Ghana that was not given to us by either the World Bank or the IMF is the one that the Champon wrote, I think, around 1979. After that, every sort of developmental plan we have gone to has been by virtue of the fact that we have gone to these agencies for help, and they have given us a way for us to live and structure our life.
Okay. George, stay with me. Let me bring in quickly Julius, who joined us. He's a young man. I want to hear from that young generation. When you wake up today, you've been told about the heroics of the freedom fighters, etc., and how Ghana was a very proud nation back then. And remember, actually, he's a current finance minister who, one of the fundamental reasons he insisted we shouldn't go to the IMF, because he says, quote him, Ghana is a proud nation. We are proud people. But we've gone. Right, and now we have the Germans hold a press conference to tell us what we need to do. They're dictating to us now. I want to bring in a staunch Nkrumahist, Kwame Jantua, who's joining us right now, connecting with us via Zoom. Hello, Kwame.
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and good evening to the other panelists.
And I invited Kwame to connect because he sent me a very interesting message when we started the show, and this is Ghana Connect, and so anybody can do so. Send me one, and if I see that you have you have a very interesting patch to the point, obviously I can invite you to join the conversation. This is the people's conversation. Kwame, let's come to you first before you even go into the the dynamics of how this plays out in the context of our independence. And we're going to have a series of conversations because we're approaching 66 years. We need to reflect. Guess you've been listening to the German ambassador. I wonder how does that make you feel as an Nkrumahist?
I cringe. Today is 57 years after the overthrow of President Nkrumah. And really, what have we done to help this country? I didn't think that it was up to the president to beg the Germans, to beg the Chinese for us. Why couldn't he get up himself and go straight to China and speak with the president of China? Especially looking at where we are today with our finances. And now we get the Germans telling us that it depends on how we look at our expenditure. How many people, having told the government that cut your expenditure, how many? Since January of this year, have we not been saying it? Have we not talked about it? The economists in this country, have we not talked about it? Even the way we even looked at how to do this reconstruction, shouldn't we have sat around the table as a country with our top economists? And we have top crack economists in this country to sit and discuss what we were going to put in front of the IMF. Did we do it? And when we said, look, we are not interested in you keeping the finance minister there, what did the president tell us? Look, it's a shame and it is sad and it is very embarrassing to hear our partners tell us that we should cut our expenditure. But why is the president so stubborn? What is it about him that he doesn't want to listen to the people of Ghana? And you know what gets to me? Is the people of Ghana who put him there. He didn't get there on his own. And he should listen to us. You see, we've forgotten the crucial bit of being in power. Service to the people. Service. You are there to serve us. And you're there to listen to us. You're not there to push your ideas onto us. It is us and you. We have put you there. We all can't go there and handle the country's finances and handle the country. So he said, you go there. And for all the things that this president told us, and looking at the background of this president, and I've known him since I was 15. He was one of the youngest people in my father's generation when they were fighting a Champions Union government. One of the youngest. So he's been through the mill. And for all the head of states we had in this country, he's one person who understands my father's generation and this generation. What has gone wrong?
Kwame, stay with me. I want to open up the conversation a bit more from the initial reactions, and I want to come back to that very initial question we were asking, and we'll go to the Nkrumah question later. But then the question, Prof. Campbell, I come back to you. So we've been begging for quite a while. You started off by suggesting that this penchant to beg is possibly fundamental because of the architecture laid for us by the neo-colonialist. Is that your fundamental explanation for why Africa has been begging and still continues to beg ourselves today?
So, as I was about to say, there's a quote by Nana Kwame Ture where it says that you can understand no problem in the lives of an oppressed people and leave out the oppressor. Anytime you try to, understand the problems of the oppressed people and leave out the oppressor, you will always blame the oppressed people for their own problems. And then there's a quote by noted psychologist, the late Nana Amos Wilson, where he says, if you want to understand any problem, don't look at who suffers from the problem, look at who benefits from the problem. And once we understand who benefits from the problem, we will understand who created the problem in the first place, including the problem of the misleaders, right? So when we have those who are educated in the so-called West, when we have those whose orientation is such that every Sunday they go to church to pray to a white man, right? I'm tying all of these things together, that these things can't be seen in a vacuum. If you have someone who is taught to think that God's only son looks exactly like the one who is giving them aid, that's going to have repercussions. If you have people who have all types of white people names, all of these things are going to have implications in terms of what they do and what they don't do. So again, most people who I know, they only look at the internal aspect. And I say the equivalent would be like a child in a high school, and they think that everything stops with the headmaster. They think that everything stops with the principal. But until they understand that there's a much broader system that has things that are, yes, going on inside of the high school, but then there are also things beyond the high school. There's the school board, there's the Ministry of Education, there are all these things that are interacting. Then they can start to understand what's going on internally and then also what's going on externally. They can start to understand how the misleaders are chosen for us, right? We're taught to think that, we elect our own leaders, but then we have to come to the question of, we have counter evidence of that. When we, decided on Nana Patrice Lumumba, what happened externally to make sure that Patrice Lumumba, who was chosen internally by the people, would not see it through his entire term? What happened to Nana Kwame Nkrumah? What happened to Nana Thomas Sankara, as I mentioned before? I can go down a list of no less than dozens.
Yeah, but Prof, many will tell you and ask you the question. I mean, all the examples you're citing, this is history. We are talking about 2023. We still seriously blaming something that happened decades ago. And by the way, Africa is not the only continent colonized. Many, many other countries were colonized who are currently fares well. So what's the difference there?
Very good.
Leadership.
Go ahead. So as I was mentioning, there are internal components and external components. The reason why I'm talking about the external components is because most people only know about the internal components. And then they, again, what it leads them to is, all right, so now let's go beat up other Africans because we're our own problems, we're our own worst enemy, we're all so forth. So if we understand that this is people's analysis and every single person I've met has this analysis, then it comes to the question of how come that analysis has not led us anywhere. For me, one thing that we have to understand is that we have enemies, and then once we know we have enemies, now we can start doing things internally in order to fight off those enemies. And the analogy is, if there's a killer in your house, right, then you can start blaming yourself and say, you know what, I think my wife was stabbed because I didn't sweep the floor well. Oh, I think that my granny was, mutilated because I didn't wash the dishes. You're trying to look only internally, but you're not dealing with the killer that is in your house. And this, for me, is inappropriate behavior. So the first thing that you have to do to take responsibility is say, I have enemies. What am I going to do about those enemies? How am I going to stop those enemies? But
and who in this contest
that we have enemies in the first place?
Yeah, and this contest
we can never take appropriate steps to say, how can I stop them from getting me trapped in debt?
Yeah, I mean, Prof, I want to ask a question on that. So in this particular contest, who should be asking these questions?
So for me, it would be the Ghanaians who have a bad analysis of the situation. They can only see up to the president, and they don't see anything beyond the president.
Okay, and then the follow-up question will be, if the Ghanaians, we are 66 years soon, for 66 years, why? We haven't been asking these questions and finding answers to them for 66 years? Is that even an excuse?
Come again?
I'm just asking. You said we Ghanaians should be asking these questions and find the answers. 66 years. What happened to asking these questions for 66 years and finding the solution? 66 years is a long time to ask and solve.
Well, the foundation is that there is no educational system in Ghana. There's only a miseducational system. And this is the reason why we have a poor analysis of just about everything that you can imagine. So when I say that there's no educational system, the miseducational system, an example would be most Ghanaians who I know, they know all about Napoleon, and they're taught to extol him. They know about Julius Caesar, and they're taught to extol him. They know about Plato, they know about Socrates, they know about every white man who ever sneezed, but they know absolutely nothing about themselves. I teach Intro to African Studies, so I know that these people have been miseducated. They don't know anything they've ever done in the past, and therefore it's very difficult for them to think for themselves about what they can do in the future. The best that they tend to do is imitate the people who they've been taught to idolize. They know about Socrates, they don't know about Imhotep. They know about Napoleon, they don't know about Dessalines. They know about Julius Caesar, but then they don't know about Queen Nzinga. They don't know anything about who they are. And I'm talking about, these are students. When I come to Intro to African Studies class, I ask them, what do you think of when you think of Africa? They say poverty, corruption, greed, mismanagement, bribery, so forth and so on. And I say, I'm amazed that you didn't mention writing, because writing was invented in Africa. They have no idea. They have been miseducated.
And very interesting thoughts, Prof. And I may add to that list. They know about Spider-Man, but they don't know about Kwekwa Nancy. George, what do you say to Prof? What do you say to Prof on his position on why we continued begging, and Ghana we've been begging the last few weeks?
I want to say something about something that Kwame said before I come to what Prof is saying.
Feel free, please.
At the end of the day, Kwame was asking why Akufo-Addo cannot go and speak directly to the Chinese president rather than trying to go through Germany or through some adversaries. One, Akufo-Addo speaks like we are first world and behaves like that, but we are not. Geopolitically, you know that China sides with Russia. And since the beginning of this Russia-Ukraine war, Akufo-Addo has constantly been pointing fingers at Russia and bashing Russia, knowing very well that your biggest creditor is their ally. And you continue on that geopolitical path. When you need help, you cannot go directly to them. Because again, it is going to not sit well with somebody like Putin. Like, hey, this guy he has nothing, but he's been speaking down to me because of this Russia-Ukraine war. and you decide to help him. So we need to know where we are in the geopolitical world and pander accordingly. But to the point that Prof is making, Prof, I understand all you are saying. I mean, it's one of the biggest things about we as Ghanaians and we as Africans. We forget about our history and our way of doing things, and we bring in what somebody else gave to us. I can agree with that. When you start practicing African traditional religion, they will tell you you are being fetish, but they would accept what the Catholics have brought in quite nicely and not complain about it at all. But both are being fetish. We were here when the Queen died, and we saw a goat being taken and using it to do tofiakwa before they killed it in order to send off the Queen. But if you as an African, you wake up in the morning and you say asase and send jinsano, and you take a cock and do the same thing, they will tell you are being fetish. So I understand your point. But when we come to the economics of it, I seriously don't think neocolonialism is what is doing us in. It is one, lack of serious leadership. Two, greed that you mentioned. In a book that was written by Thomas Burgess called The Looting Machine, Thomas Burgess was able to outline how one Chinese man called Sampa was able to accumulate more land in a country like Angola than the Angolians themselves had. And he was pillaging that land. That same process started happening in Ghana when Galamsey started. But we turned a blind eye like an ostrich. We put our head in the ground and continued borrowing. We went there borrowing. There are a lot of examples in Africa whereby the Chinese have moved in, and now states that were independent and sovereign have become vassal states to the Chinese, because they would give you. A time will come that they will come back and say, okay, since you can't pay, now this is what we are going to do. In the process of doing that, they start amassing state properties and literally take over your country. There were examples there. We weren't. It's not like we don't know. We know these countries, Tanzania, all of these countries, they are there in East Africa that have gone through this. So why did we sit down? There is an adage in that I can say that if you see somebody's beard burning, you just fetch water and put it by yourself. Don't say it's not your case, because it could come to you. So you have to be prepared. So leadership is what has let us down, because again, when you see state property being taken over or state-run institutions being taken over by Chinese of sovereign African countries, and them now appointing Chinese people to head those agencies, these countries have become vassal countries to China. So why do we, a country that is that endowed, allow ourselves to get to this point?
Okay, so you've added a different dimension. We're begging because of greed. Okay, so let's go to the big question that Nkrumah is asking us 66 years on. We need to assess something he said. And Ernest, I'll bring you in first, and then I'll go to Kwame Jantua on that. And before I bring you, Ernest, in, I wanted to listen to that, one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. This is Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, just a little over 66 years ago, when he was so proud of the Ghanaian and what we can achieve when we take on the rest of the world.
We agreed on terms.
There is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
Ernest, was Nkrumah right or wrong?
Evans, I think Nkrumah is right. We are capable of managing our own affairs. But the state we find ourselves now has not given credence to Nkrumah's belief because of how we have managed our affairs since independence. If we had taken Nkrumah seriously and seen that, okay, these are the resources we have as a nation, this is where we want to go. This is the plan. We work with it, irrespective of which government is in power or which government is not in power, and we keep on with the vision. We would have gotten somewhere. Countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and some of the East Asian tigers have followed a path of industrialization since like independence from their time. They were also colonized, but they had a plan. They had a national vision, a national agenda. So the question is, what is Ghana doing? Are we following a conscious path of progress, or we are just going through an 8-year cycle of manifestos that doesn't seem to solve the perennial issues that is confronting the nation? So we need to have a national conversation, look at our problems objectively, and ask ourselves, what are the resources available to us? What are the challenges we confront? Then how do we overcome these challenges with the resources that is at our disposal? We are a blessed country. We have a good human resource. We have some of the brightest young workforce in Africa, and we can rise above the challenge. But if our leadership will not look at the situation and put the resources where they ought to, but rather engage in other flagship projects which do not really solve the problem of this nation, then we'll just come and complain and everything will keep happening. We need to have a conscious national plan that seeks to address the fundamental problem of this country.
Just one large challenge to you and Kwame will come in. We need to have a national conscious plan. Listen, I've had that for as long as I've been alive, and I'm pretty sure those who've been alive older than me have also had it too. 66 years on, this is where we are. Almost every 5 years go to the IMF. If you look at the Nkrumah's declaration there in the context of the reality of today, have we proved him right or have we proved him wrong? Hello, Ernest.
Sorry, Evans, is that question to me?
Yeah, to you. Very briefly. If you look at the context and the reality of today, have we proved him right or proved him wrong?
We have. If Nkrumah was alive, he would have been disappointed in our performance today, but I don't think all hope is lost. I'm a young Ghanaian who believes that there's really hope for the future. Once we get leadership right, there's a good hope for us as a country.
Kwame, that to you are the Nkrumah in this conversation. Nkrumah makes the bold declaration: the black African, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. Clearly, IMF is knocking at our door again. The Germans are dictating to us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and what they give us, what they won't give us, etc. I mean, 66 years on, we are still begging and begging and begging. Isn't that the obvious evidence that we simply aren't capable?
Is it the obvious evidence? Where did Nkrumah himself start from? He started with a development plan. And by the time Nkrumah was overthrown, what didn't we have in this country? What couldn't we do in this country? And so you'd have thought those who overthrew him would take over and probably, even with the factories, continue with the factories. Which of the factories are standing today? The last ones that are standing, the textile factories, where are they today? Where are they today? And what have we been able to replace with what we lost? So I'll give an example. The NDC government came in and did a 40-year national development plan. The NDC government came in and did a constitutional review committee. The 40-year national development plan is about 994. The constitutional review is about 994 pages. Equally, the long-term development plan that was done by the NDC is around those number of pages. And everything that is in this country in terms of the natural resource, the interviewing of people, how we should put a national development plan together was done. This development plan was handed over to President Akufo-Addo 2017. Where is it? Where is it? Because, Evans, the manifestos have not helped us. When parties come into power, they throw the manifestos away. They don't even refer to the manifestos anymore. Look at this Fourth Republic. Take what has happened in this Fourth Republic and take what happened in Nkrumah's First Republic. Put the two together and see which of the two was better. Look, the natural resource we have in our human beings here, that's the most important natural resource we have. How have we been able to change the mindset of the people? Everybody is begging.
But you asked the question, how? I mean, the answer is obvious. We haven't been able to change the mindset. That's
And
failure.
why?
But
And Evans,
yeah,
why? It's a leadership.
but
It's a
but you
leadership.
you ask why. Some may answer that question and say because we're simply not capable.
We're capable.
I don't think it's about capability.
Yeah,
Capability.
Kwame, hold that thought for a second. Let me just want to hear from George, and I'll come back to you, Kwame. George, yes.
Now, we are capable. It's just that the people that are supposed to start it are the ones that are not doing it. Because, again, it starts from the head and it trickles down. So since the leadership has not been gotten right, we cannot get it right. Until that leadership situation is addressed, trust me, everything we do is just seriously just it's just for aesthetics.
Kwame.
And, I want to say something about Ernest.
Please go on.
Ernest, the situation is this. We need to stop relying on manifestos like Kwame just said and start turning the development plans into laws that any government that comes cannot override.
But you think if we could, we would have done it by now? Do you think they don't know?
No. It's just that every party has some political equity that they don't want to relinquish. Because if they follow that system of laying it as a law, that if I am building the houses in Salanubu or wherever it is, and you cannot say you are not going to finish it, but rather it's mandatory that you finish it before we go for another loan to come and do something else, this nonsense will stop. But because every government wants to borrow their own borrowing and the greed squander their own squandering, that is why we cannot finish projects, and we have so many white elephant projects scattered over Ghana without it being finished. And we keep borrowing to start new ones while the old ones are not done.
Yeah, I mean, George, let me bring back Kwame. George is just making the point. Those who answered that Nkrumah question in the negative is making it stronger. Both of you, George and Kwame, you both complain about what happened after Nkrumah. All is about things we haven't done, how we have failed. Isn't that just buttressing the point that Nkrumah possibly after 66 years, we've just shown that we just can't do it?
Oh, but why was Nkrumah able to do it?
Was he able to do it?
Why was Nkrumah able to build all those factories? Why was Nkrumah able to get independence for a lot of African countries? You know, the challenge we have in Ghana today is lack of leadership and the partisanship. We've got to be able to stop that. We've got to be able to say, hey, Mr. Ex-President, come, let's sit, let's talk. Mr. Sansogia, come, let's sit, let's talk, and put the partisanship aside. You know, once we finish elections, it's building the nation that matters, not building a political party. And you see in this country, we tend to build political parties above building the nation. So if you're not part of us, you're not in the game. Well, how can you rule the country that way? How? Because everybody can contribute to the building of the nation. Do they allow everybody to be part and parcel of it? Look, yesterday in Parliament, one fisticuffs nearly thrown over this EC bill.
Yeah.
One fisticuffs nearly thrown. What does that tell you? We don't trust each other. And anybody who brings anything to Parliament, there's an ulterior motive. Why? Couldn't parliamentarians sit down and iron out these things?
But Kwame, in fact, all of you have said it, in fact, but possibly the exception of Prof. Yourself, George, and Ernest, all of you say we are pointing the finger at, our leaders, our parliamentarians, but they are a product of this environment. They are like me and you before they became politicians. So while we go and we elect them from amongst us. So why are we pointing at them and forgetting that they are three more fingers pointing back at us?
But Evans, remember, just a minute. Let me finish. Evans, remember, we have put them there, and if we put them there, they should be able to change their mindset and do what the people are looking for.
But how do you expect them to do that when the rest of society hasn't done that?
Evans, can I come in on that point?
Okay, just a second. Let Kwame wrap up on this point, and you can come in and hear from Prof.
Say that again, Evans. Why what?
I'm saying you expect them to change their mindset once you appoint them. Suddenly, but they are still part of this environment. They are. How can they?
The fact that they are still part of the environment doesn't mean that they cannot look at the entire spectrum of what's happening in the country and say to themselves, this is not right. Let's try and change it as leaders. As leaders. When you go to a classroom and a teacher gets into the classroom and she sees some of the pupils misbehaving, they might be break people in the children in the class. She say, I'm not going to allow this to happen. Are leaders doing that with us? I don't think they are.
Okay, Kwame, stay with me. Let me bring in George. George, you said you had something to say to that question.
No, it was Prof.
Oh, Prof. Yes, Prof. Go on.
Yes, I do. So in all of these cases, what we're doing is we are mixing up the cause with the effect, or we're rather looking at the effect of something and then thinking that that effect is the cause. So if we have poor leaders, we're not getting into the question of why do we have poor leaders, who benefits from us having poor leaders, and then we'll get into the reason why those poor leaders are there in the first place. And again, the point I made in the chat is that these leaders don't come from Mars. They come directly from the followers who have the exact same created tastes, desires, and values implanted in them for the benefit of the people who put those created tastes, desires, and values into them in the first place. So if I go to the leader and I ask the leader, do you want to travel to Dubai? They will say yes. And then I go to the follower, and then the follower will also say yes. The only difference is one of opportunity. If I go to a leader and say, would you like a Lexus SUV? They say yes. I go to the follower and say, do you want a Lexus SUV? They also say yes. Again, the only difference is opportunity. All of them have the same tastes and desires. For who planted those tastes and desires into them in the first place?
Why don't we create our own? Why don't you create our own bike? Why don't we create our own Lexus?
This is the point that this is the exact point that I'm driving at. The point is that if we actually had an educational system, we would implement what I refer to as functional hatred. Functional hatred. We are not taught to hate our enemies, we're taught to love our enemies. Now, what do I mean? I don't mean you're foaming at the mouth, you want to beat people up. I'm looking at China versus Japan. So some people may know of the Nanking, or what's also known as the Nanjing massacre, where Japan came in, raped the women, killed the men, split babies open with swords and so forth and so on. But now later on, when Japan is the first of the Asian tigers to come out with Sony and all these, major products, China could have said, oh, we want to support Japan. But what did they do? They implemented what I call functional hatred, which means I hate your thing. I don't want to support your thing. I don't want to buy your thing. I want my own. So rather than going to support the Japanese, they have a memory of who their enemies are, and they said, rather than going to buy Japanese stuff, we want to create our own things internally. And now we see what China has done with that functional hatred type of policy. I did a talk on this same topic where I looked at the heads of state of 3 countries. Now, what do? If you look at the head of state of Japan, they drive a Toyota. If you look at the head of state of the US, they drive a Cadillac.
Yeah.
If you look at Germany, they drive Mercedes-Benz. If you look at the head of state of the UK, they drive, Rolls-Royce. If you go to Italy, it's a Lancia Thesis. If you go to France, it's Citroën and Peugeot. If you go to Korea, it's a Hyundai Equus. If you go to any country, that's because they say, I don't care what is the best, I care what is mine. I hate everything else functionally. I only want what's mine. But when we come here, we say we want what's nice. We want what they have. So rather than us getting what is our own and say, let's have a motorcade of Kantanka, and then let's say Kantanka, every year you have to produce another part indigenously, and we're going to set up 3D printing so you can do that. We're going to say we want Toyotas. So now if I have a Land Cruiser, that means we have the same tastes. We have the same desires. Both leaders and followers have the exact same tastes, desires, and values implanted in them. I remember when Pizza Hut opened up, there was a line all the way across the Accra Mall parking lot so that they could get a taste and desire that was implanted into them. So until you stop confusing the effect with the actual cause, you will come to say, what caused us to have leaders who want all the same things that are destroying them? What makes them want to have a vacation in the U.S.? This is no slight to, I think George is in the U.S. right now. Or all of them want the same things. But until we come to that, and again, we have to operate on the basis of race first. So even though Nana Kwame Nkrumah said the black man is capable of managing his own affairs, he didn't operate on a black first or race first agenda. He dealt with whoever's on the continent, which is why he married who he married, an Arab out of, Egypt. He's talking about black, people managing their own affairs. But if you look at the All African People's Conference, they're inviting everyone who is on the continent, whether it's Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, all these places where they're enslaving black people to this very day, as opposed to saying, let's have Haiti come as an official delegate. No, you're inviting even the Dutch Boers in South Africa are being invited.
I mean,
So
and Prof, you really drill down to some of the aspects of this that really to take a long time to drill down. And it's far more than just getting it right. The nuanced issues that you've touched on. I want to end by asking a simple question, and then I want all of you to look into the crystal ball and do it in 30 seconds for me, if you may. Kwame first. So in this conversation, many of you have tried to diagnose a problem why we continue begging and we're begging. I need to ask you, we are going through this cycle. This is possibly the worst we've seen in the long history of begging. Definitely, sometime, and nobody knows when, we'll come out of this crisis. Are you confident that we will stop begging at some point? And remember that, let's put it in this context. We have a president when he came in, championed Ghana Beyond Aid, stood toe-to-toe with Macron, and dished out to Macron, and he became an international celebrity for telling Macron to the face that, yeah, listen, we want to eat what we grow what we eat, want to be self-reliant, of course, but the evidence is there. The jury is now out. So the question, are we going to continue begging in perpetuity, or you think there's a point where Ghana and the rest of the continent stop begging and become self-reliant and independent? Kwame?
Evans, at this point, I think it's up to the people of Ghana to make sure that the leaders that we're going to put in power will do what the people want. Every Ghanaian today, and I think every African today, is much, much, much more advanced in mind than Kwame Nkrumah's time. And I believe they would push governments to do what they want them to do. I do agree with Ernest that there is still hope. It isn't all zero, nothing can happen. I think there's still hope, but it's also up to the people of this country to make sure that the leaders that we put in do what we want them to do on behalf.
Okay, so you're confident that the time will come that we'll stop begging. Georgia, you confident that you share that confidence? Okay, don't have John.
No.
You share that confidence?
I'm sorry,
yeah, briefly.
Yes, I do share that confidence, but it is going to take all of us digging deep and understanding the fact that we have the power, they don't have the power. And the question that you asked Kwame at the other time, that they are a product of the same environment. Evans, they stood and they showed us something. That is why they got elected. It's not like we went and picked them and just say, come and be our. They showed us that their thought process was slightly different and things like that. But once they get elected, they revert back to who they truly are. So me personally, I think the Ghanaian populace should vet very well who comes to stand in front of them and ask them for that mandate to make sure that they are sending people in there that are not wolves dressed in sheep clothing. That is going to be the first step to we being able to get out of this perpetual begging. If the mindset does not change, then this is like we going in circles trying to get to a destination that we don't know where it is. So yes, I have hope, but that hope starts from within us, making sure that we individually change our mindset. If I can change one person's mindset, and Evans, you can change one change one, sooner or later, the consciousness is going to catch on, and we can start understanding that Kantanka is as good as Lexus, like Prof said.
Okay. I like your optimism, all of you. Prof, thank you very much. Ernest, thank you very much as well. All of you who connected, thank you very much. Many of you are joining us on many social media platforms. Let me quickly share a few before I wrap up here. This one says the reason why Ghana and Africa are at these levels is that we are not conscious and of what we do from leadership to the citizens. Our leaders are the biggest problem. If one person can convince several people to bring positive and negative change, for example, from President Rawlings, that should be the quality leaders that we need, he says. And there's view here from Guy Fox, who sent us this one, and Guy says, a simple case. What we must understand when we seek to compare ourselves to countries like Malaysia, Singapore, etc., is that those nations have a sense of self. In Ghana, however, we have no sense of self. Hence, we are where we are, and they are where they are. Guy says that one. Albert says Nkrumah had his plans of industrialization. Those who overthrew him abandoned all his plans. Even the pictures were banned. They honored the coup maker by naming the gateway to Ghana after him. He says, and the final one before we go, this is a big shame. And what is Nana doing? What has come over him? Now we go to Chinese. The Galamsey war is lost. Truth be told, leadership is the biggest problem, he says. Those are your thoughts. More of these conversations as we approach 66 years. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.